We have all seen the headlines. The Anthropic Mythos isn't just another AI tool. It is a frontier system that has shattered the traditional 30-day patch cycle, finding and changing exploits in hours that used to take humans months. We are officially living in the era of machine speed attacks. While much of the industry is in panic, our guest today is focused on counteroffensive. He calls it Project Glasswing, a strategy for the world where vulnerabilities have grown wings while the traditional playbook ecosystem is still tying their shoelaces. Thank you so much, Debashish, for joining us today at Identity First Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you and to discuss the most recent and the most happening things in cybersecurity world and AI today. To start with, Debashish, my first question is all about Mythos. Since Anthropic has recently revealed Mythos, so can you explain in simple terms what exactly it's all about, and how scary or has it really shattered the cybersecurity world?
Okay, so straight into Mythos.
Sure.
The trending news, of course. So if you look at Mythos, it's from Anthropic, and without the hype, it's technically an AI model. Okay, and this AI model is extremely awesome at breaking software. Now, when I say breaking software, not in a very chaotic way, but in an intelligent and methodical manner also. That means it can read through massive software code bases, it can find hidden weakness, unknown bugs, and even figure out how these weaknesses could be exploited. So think of the world's best top 0.1% of the ethical hackers, but just multiplied by machine speed and scale, right? Unlike earlier AI models, it does not just suggest, but it can also chain steps together like a real world attacker, simulate an attack, and can solve very complex challenges end to end, right? And it is, of course, a big deal because it's compressing the time dramatically. I mean, what used to take weeks or months of elite researchers, Mythos can do it in hours or maybe in minutes, right? So the discovery phase, the discovery of a vulnerability to the exploit window is just collapsing to a very short, aperture, right? So this is the very core shock to cybersecurity, because the same capability, which used to help defenders find and fix things faster, is now also able to enable attackers to exploit faster, right? And yes, the world is shaken because it kind of breaks all the old assumptions, because for many years, security just relied on the fact that attackers are slower than the defenders, right? And they always thought that 0 days are going to be very rare, right? And we always have time to patch. But Mythos kind of challenged everything. It kind of industrialized the discovery of vulnerabilities, right? And that's a paradigm shift. So it exposes a lot of problems in cyber programs, right? But Mythos, technically tells the research world that exploits can be ready the very same day. Okay, so it exposes how outdated our security operating models are. So it definitely has all the things to scare humanity at this point in time.
That sounds really concerning. And just to as a cybersecurity professional, I was going through your blogs and recent content that you have been kind of writing in the public domain, and I see that you have been constantly talking about it. So does Mythos, as a cybersecurity professional, excite you or scare you?
I would say both, but not in the equal measure, right? It should make every cyber professional, in fact, more demanding, not more afraid, and definitely not obsolete. So, see, it's exciting in a way because tools like Mythos finally are attacking the hardest unsolved problem in cybersecurity, which is, turning, hey, we found some problems into, hey, we actually reduced risk, right? Because for years, we have been constantly looking at, finding more and more bugs, too many findings, not enough prioritization, and not enough validation. But Mythos, basically pushes all this capability into, reality of machine scale AI. And it's a big progress. So Mythos doesn't change what attackers can do. It changes how fast and how often they can do it. See that? So the edge case of a 0 day that used to be very uncommon is now going to be very common. So you should not be surprised when there are these celebrity vulnerabilities like the Log4j becoming extremely common or could be a weekly phenomenon going forward. Rare exploits becomes extremely repeatable, or even sophisticated attacks becoming commodity that people can actually buy off the shelf. Not people, but of course bad people or attackers, right? So, but of course, Mythos will not replace humans, so nothing to be scared about. But it does raise the bar on what it really means to be being good at security. See that?
Absolutely, yes. So it's a testing time, it's like a litmus test actually. So because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, there are many cybersecurity vendors in the which who are there in the market, and I think they all need to kind of upscale themselves because probably till now maybe they were in a very mediocre kind of space, but now considering with Mythos and elements like that coming in, it will definitely be a different ballgame altogether actually.
Absolutely.
So what do you think, my next question will be, Debashish, what do you think about the the students who are studying cybersecurity now, the courses, do they need to be also upgraded? Definitely. Yeah.
So I think students are probably at the right time of their training and education. So for people like me who started cybersecurity probably 2 decades ago,
right,
this was like a distant future, and we're like, oh, this is never going to happen because compute is not going to go this fast. AI was not a reality that existed at the fingertips of everybody, right? So now that has become possible. So for folks in colleges now, for them, if Mythos like things become everyday affair, they probably will design better strategies to defend them, right? But of course, it's a good learning for anybody in cybersecurity to ensure that they understand how good or bad AI can be.
Absolutely. And this also, my next question, as I touched upon, is a lot of firms, who are already cybersecurity, vendors. So do you also foresee that many will be like wiped off from the market as if they don't scale up, or they, kind of considering in terms of the offerings, because now the defense system has to be so advanced. So what do you feel that it will take a full shift right now in terms of the vendors who are present today?
Most likely, they are going to collaborate, right? Tools will begin to share information, but the only problem with tooling today is, while they do share information, they never share accountability for the outcomes, right? So customers will still be left behind to interpret, prioritize, and act on their own. And that is a big gap, right? So what customers actually will need to do is, instead of looking at 50 integrated dashboards, they have to find out a way to, unify that all together, decide and act across these phases like discovery, prioritization, validation, and remediation or fixing, right? So this will require a much deeper coordination than most vendors are willing to give up their control for, right? See, in cybersecurity, vendor collaborating just enough to stay relevant, to be honest. They are collaborating exactly or just enough to stay relevant, right? The problem is attackers don't really care about the boundaries of your products, right? So until the collaboration moves from simple data sharing to decision making, the customer remains the integration layer, of course.
Now, moving on, that is a great context setting actually, and talking about Mythos. Now, my next question is moving on, how has cybersecurity industry evolved in your experience? And is it still a push market, or have the customers started looking for solutions themselves?
These product vendors?
Yes. Till now we were, it was still a push market, but now considering how the entire the security system has evolved, how cybersecurity landscape is today, is it like where customers come proactively?
So investment in cyber usually depends on the nature of the audience involved, right? Push or pull, it is very subjective, right? What happens is, if you look at most tooling, right? Most tooling will eventually move towards a platform ecosystem, right? And what will happen is, of course, they'll all leverage AI, in all possible means. But what will happen is, the choice of a customer will still be in two ways. One is the tooling that is required for them to stay abreast of security. So that will be a fundamental investment in a proactive manner. But they will, of course, always be subjected to a bunch of tooling and processes that will always be a reaction to something. Like nobody knew Mythos is going to be here this soon, right? So there will be a part of your response that will be proactive, that will look like was an afterthought. But the majority part of cybersecurity always is driven by the fact that people want to stay ahead of the curve. They want to fight the attacker, so they have to be ahead of the curve in terms of tooling, technology, people, and processes.
Sure, but for example, what I'm trying to understand is like it may be for specific industries, right? But now considering that the entire landscape has changed, is it a very proactive thing when that companies plan and budget it and proactively come for that, or is it like still a push kind of stuff?
It depends on the nature of the cyber risk, actually, right? I have sat across enough enterprise buying cycles, and the pattern is pretty clear. Vendors will not win. The customers believe that they will succeed with them, right? And then all these products also have their own cycle. They get better over time, right? Now, it's not AI. It's technically decision latency today, right? The fact that everyone's focused on tools getting smarter, very few are focused on how slow the organizations still are at deciding and acting, right? So if the gap between knowing something is wrong versus doing something meaningful about it, so there will always be a combination of push and pull. The industry in cyber is constantly going to be about push and pull. Sometimes what will happen is they will eventually get pulled towards something, then they start adopting it, see the advantages, and then stop calling it a push product anymore. Right? That's the primary reality that I see today. Of course, nobody wants to go buy tooling, wasting their budget on things that they don't need today. Right? So it's going to be continuing to be a push and pull together.
That's good to do. And is AI the biggest weapon for attackers or defenders right now? And how can we separate real AI from the marketing noise?
Marketing noise will always be there. Now, AI is not the biggest weapon for either side, to be honest. Speed is, right? AI just happens to be the best way to manufacture it. Not because AI is smarter, but because attackers are smarter, right? And the truth is, the attackers are not constrained by compliance challenges. The attackers are not constrained by taking a change control window before they change something. Enterprises have to go through all these processes, right? And attackers are faster to adopt a new technology. They're already optimized for speed and iterating on a daily basis. So AI will actually find what they're already very good at, right? So AI isn't the weapon. Speed is the weapon. Attackers are using AI to move faster. So defenders are still using AI, of course, but to analyze faster, not act faster, right? The winners will be the one who can close that gap.
Very well said and very well point taken actually, Debashish. So AI, you said speed is a real challenge. It's not AI actually. But just to simplify it for our audience also, and for me as well, for the non-tech audience as well. So AI is just a platform, right? It is just like a catalyst, basically. That's what you're trying to say, actually. But will it be more advantageous towards the defenders or towards the attackers?
It will be, see, AI, the honest truth is AI is not the weapon for both sides. Whoever can react to changes fast is at an advantage.
Yeah, okay.
The defender cannot say that he doesn't have access to the same tooling or same AI as the attacker. But do you have the speed of light at which they are moving?
Right.
Today, Mythos did not open up a detection challenge. We already had the ability to detect problems at scale. Mythos only exposed us that your assumption that you always have time to react just no longer exists.
Right.
So you are today prepared to fight with certain scenarios at a volume of X per month or X per day. That just grew exponentially. So unless you have the ability to react at the same speed, like be able to responsibly validate finding at scale and remediate at scale, you will fail the game. As simple as that. So it's a fair tooling or the fair weapon on both sides. It just remains to be seen whether or not the defenders win, because defenders have a lot of overhead of processes, which the hackers don't, right? So if it's a bank, let's say, for example, and you're a part of a security team, you probably would find out an ideal window for a scan when there is no active business in the bank, because you don't know to disrupt. Maybe your activity has the ability to disrupt something, so you probably would say, I'm going to wait until the weekend to do this because it has an ability to disrupt. But this nice thought doesn't happen to your attacker. He's going to attack you at your least expected window, right? So that's an advantage to them. So of course, AI is a big weapon to people who can weaponize it faster.
Yeah, and I think in one of your contents I was reading in your write-ups, you said that the traditional defense playbook is, still tying their shoelaces.
Yes.
Right? So, yes. So, I think they don't have compliance to meet. So that
they don't have compliance to meet. They don't have a change window to meet. They don't have to go and inform their superiors before they do something. Right?
Right.
So, the run book is very different.
Absolutely. So what is the way to keep up, or to, as an expert, what do you think, what would be the best way to keep up with this AI attacks there? If, in terms, because they, as you mentioned, they don't have any compliance or any processes to meet, right? While on the contrary here, when you have a defender, ethical hacker, there are many things to kind of meet before you do that. So how will the race look like in future?
The race will look like, see, the point is you have to adapt. There is no other way but to adapt, right? Sometimes you do not have a plan. You start running and then improvise on the way, right? So today with Mythos, at least, it's only 10 days since a preview went live. In fact, now people are scared because the Mythos code itself is stolen. Okay? I'm not sure if you know this, the Mythos code got stolen yesterday. So what happened is it was supposed to be a limited preview because it's too powerful and it can be wrong to get the hands of the bad people. But unfortunately, that thing got stolen now. Right? So what will eventually happen in the future is people will adapt. They will figure out, they'll come out of their shells. They'll figure out that, that the volume or the surge of vulnerabilities is something that they do not control anyway, right? They will have to figure out a mass scale model of being able to validate whether or not a vulnerability is indeed something that can impact them given their security controls in place. See, because outside of tooling, you have to also realize that people are buying controls also, right? So they have got an antivirus, they've got an EDR, they've got a firewall, they've got a WAF. So these are all investments where they're trying to protect themselves, right? So it's not just all things detecting things. So they also have got things to protect themselves. Or maybe they have got a good patch program, right? So what they need to do is, once something is found at lightning speed, now they need to validate whether or not this particular vulnerability is something that can impact me. And if it can impact me, is it something that is detonable in my environment given my current security controls that I've already spent time, money and efforts in setting up? And if it does, then how fast can I go and make these remediation work for me before the attack actually can happen on me? So they will eventually find out a model to work at speed at which attacks are happening. Necessity is the mother of invention, and good thing here is they know what to do. They just need to squeeze time.
Yes. So it's just nothing but, and as you rightly said, necessity is a mother. So something is pushing us to do something much better in this.
Correct. And tooling is there. We just need to figure out the right processes, because you don't want to ignore essential things like change management, ignore essential things like what can be the impact from a change, right? Of course, the attacker doesn't care, but we do, right? Because at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a risk management function. And as a company or as an organization, you are always going to be exposed, because exposure means business, right? I can't be an e-commerce company and not have a website. I can't be a payment application on phone and not have a mobile app, right? So I will always have exposure to good people and bad people at the same time, right? But is it necessary that my exposure necessarily results in risk, right? And if it results in risk, how much is the risk? You don't want to, place a control that is more expensive than the actual value at risk. I keep telling people how when you buy a security camera, you don't buy a 10,000 rupee security camera to protect something which is 1,000 rupees worth.
Right.
So that's gonna also happen. People will figure out a way to remediate and validate at scale. In the meanwhile, we'll have changes happening into our cybersecurity policies, change management policies, policies that allow us to, probably have a blanket approval to a certain category of things, so that we are not wasting time, in the red tapeism of a process when such things happen. So the things surrounding, mass scale remediation, mass scale, response plan that otherwise requires some permissions and, building blocks will get faster. There's just no other way.
It's an overhaul, basically.
Yes.
So that's great. Now moving to my next question, Debashish. In your experience, how has the buyer profile changed? Is it still the CISO making decisions, or are the boards actually the CFOs and the CEOs the new part of our conversation?
Yes. See, if you look at what used to happen so far, security teams buy security tools, right?
Right.
Of course, the CISO or the head of security will drive everything. Like, conversations were technical in nature. They will discuss coverage, capability, and features, right? Success will always look like, hey, we have deployed this tool. But now, when it becomes a matter of ROI, there are other panel members that want to see value. Right? The CISO would probably be looking at, did we reduce risk? Plus, how did we execute it? Right? It is sometimes far more operational. The CFO would say, we spend some amount of money, so look at the cost, the ROI, and the downside of this protection. With this protection in place, did we lose our edge? Right? Like speed to response in business. CEO would be bothered about business continuity and reputation, of course, right? And from a governance standpoint and accountability, the board. Right? So success now looks like, did we reduce business risk in a measurable form? Right? So there are other stakeholders beyond the CISO now in today's context. Of course, CISO is still the operator in chief to validate things like, does this reduce risk, or does it does it just add to more noise in my environment? Will this integrate to my existing workflow, or break it and have to start fresh? Or can I show outcomes and not just activity? Right? So the CISO office will still continue to be the one that will shortlist your vendors, validate
Core capabilities, right? It is a points.
Own their implementation, but they will not have the unilateral power anymore. Because the CFOs are also now the new gatekeepers. Of course, they're the good guys. Like, what financial exposure that we are reducing? But at the end of the day, cybersecurity or risk management in cyber is all about how much financial impact were we able to reduce, right? And if you bought something, why this and why not something cheaper? These are the questions that will come from the CFO, right? And things like, is this replacing a tool, or are we adding more cost? So security will compete. Security will compete with other projects which are digital in nature that generates revenue, right? Nobody wants to spend. If you have $100 to spend, you don't prioritize security over a model that's going to get you more business, right? So it depends. And of course, if you cannot quantify your value in the board, you will not get the budget. So, these things are all necessary. So security has to now go fight, with other projects that has an impact on the bottom line of the company, right? So while the CISO is there are other stakeholders as well.
So it's like the power is kind of now divided, right? It's not just
I won't say divided, but shared. Because with these tabletop exercises that CISOs are doing with their board, the boards have also become far more smarter in terms of cyber. They understand cyber risk.
Awareness has increased. Right.
Yes.
Right. And how? What do you recommend? Like, do you recommend that the more shut the tabletop exercises should be done, or what is your take? It's always good to have the CISOs making a call, or now it's like overall the entire management coming together and making a call. Like, what, in your perspective, what works well? If I may ask so.
Say, so of course, more than one person needs to be involved. The more people involved is probably always a smarter decision, right? That's why we would have two houses in the parliament, right? Somebody has to question, right? But the point here is, if you look at the CISO, you are basically going to hold him responsible to protect you from technologies that he did not create. You want a business advantage, hence you adopted a certain thing, maybe AI, maybe another digital transformation project, and nobody asked the CISO whether or not we can use these tech stack to build this capability and be a bigger, business player or be a winner. So the CISO technically is going to protect you from technologies that he did not choose. So you do really want to keep him involved. You do really want him to be the first person to make a decision, because you're going to hold him responsible, accountable. And in an era where CISOs are going to jail, I think they must be given a seat at the table to make the first call. Of course, there will be questions, and the questions will be responded, and it will eventually end up being a decision that everybody took together. But somebody needs to be in charge. If he's accountable, if he's responsible, then he has to own it.